today. We've talked with staff about making sure that we do have elections at another meeting so that we duly elect the chair going forward. So just to be clear on that, but if someone else would like to facilitate this morning. No one looked up even at that one. Good, thank you. So we'll get started, and if we could have, do we need roll call? No. We're good on that? Okey doke. Approval of the April 3rd, 2024 TMC meeting summary.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the minutes as distributed, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Item 3, the cost to complete RTA projects, mandates, legal requirements. Mr. Murjimi.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, as you recall, over the last several years, been having conversations both with this committee as well as with the RTA board. I'm sorry, my mic was off. So, making sure that we can comply to the recommendations of the audit. The two major issues on that, and we'll run through those in a minute. The two major issues to keep an eye on is one, the audit recommendation was we're going to identify additional funding beyond RTA revenues to complete at least 2 projects that are currently in the TIP. The other recommendation was obviously to continue to look at which projects need to be advanced back to the voters, which the board had already advanced 4 projects to the voters. So those 2 actions obviously have been taken in the past, and those are solutions for a path forward. So with that, Madam Chair, if I may, Rick's going to give you the outline, and then we'll open it up for questions, and at your pleasure, we can dive into any issues.
Good to see everybody. Thank you for a few minutes of your time. As Farhad said, wanted to kind of give an overview to prompt all this and to set the stage for the discussion going forward. So simple, short summaries of the charge or the task in front of us is to prepare a recommendation or multiple, if so desired, within the 60 days that addresses the $143 million funding gap that's been identified, meet our ballot compliance requirements for the projects that must start by July 1st, 2026, and that are also fully compliant with all the legislative, IGA, and audit requirements. So we're going to have multiple legal aspects of it that we want to make sure we're in consistency and compliance with. This slide is simply a snapshot of all the remaining projects, a simple assessment of where our things stand with regards to our construction timeframe, our start compliance, and then an overall delivery assessment. It's subjective. It's based on the information we've been getting from the project teams, and it's meant simply to be a high clip level summary for us to refer to as needed, just to make sure that we have an understanding and a common agreement understanding of where things stand, where they're at, and what's coming down the pipeline. We extrapolated out of that the 6 critical projects of which compliance is still needed to hit the July 1st, 2026, or what we refer to oftentimes as the period 4 compliance requirement. And that includes the 6 here. Previous slides have sometimes shown a 7th one, which included the Valencia project from Kolb to Houghton. That project's under construction. City has that fully underway, and so that's met all the necessary requirements. But these are the 6 remaining that are a combination of projects with the city as well as with ADOT. So there are a number of resources available that are going to be to guide our development on recommendations. including the board packet that Farhad referenced from the most recent meeting, administrative code, performance audits, IGAs for all the respective projects, and then last but not least, the proposal from the city of Tucson that we'll hear more about later. To summarize the limitations that we're going to have to operate within, we got to be aware of these following items and constraints that we're going to have to work within. First and foremost, all available regional and RTA revenue has been programmed in the adopted fiscal year 25-29 TIP. In addition, our RTA revenue collection is going to end June 30, 2026, which is coming up next year. Lastly, projects with scope changes are going to be required to be deferred to RTA next. As an exception to that, any kind of deferral is not needed if additional non-RTA revenue can be secured, and I'll hit more upon that in a second. So our options to set the stage as we go forward with the discussion is apply funds from any sale of remnant parcels. We've heard conversations about that. That's an activity we have underway. Apply any local funds, apply any funding due to the RTA, apply any grant funds. So the city's already pursued that with one of the projects on 22nd Street. Defer to RTA next or others that can be identified through this group and through this exercise today. Madam Chair, that completes my presentation. Can answer any questions or allow you to jump into it.
If I may, and thank you. Thanks, Rick.
Always.
Being new a bit. I do have a question, if I may, because one of the things we need to talk about, obviously, is the proposed scope changes from the city of Tucson.
Yes.
And what the information is suggesting is that that there can't be scope changes without going to the ballot. We have had scope changes in projects, other projects in RTA, have we not? And if we have, like Broadway or others, how have we accommodated those and how is that different than a proposed scope change we're looking at for the city today?
Farhad, I'll have to let you deal with that because some of those have happened in also executive session. So if you don't mind.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you don't mind, go back to the previous slide. So under the statute, there was a 10% cap. So prior to reaching that 10% cap, we were able to make modifications, but we have reached that 10%. So as a result, additional changes would have to go back to the voters.
And the 10% of the entire road improvement categories or by project?
10% by element. So it's
By element.
the roadway element. No, it's by category. And then I know that, let me guess where that's coming from. In the individual IGAs, there's a 10% provision by project, but that's applied to cost overruns. That's a different 10%. This 10% is by element.
And where it's coming from for me is what I look at and say the TMC board asked, or the RTA asked us to identify a path forward. What I think of is simply, where do we go next? And when I look at how we figure, and I'm sorry, Tim, I see your hand is up. If you can give me 1 second. There's two ways we get RTA done. We increase revenues or we decrease expenditures. And that's what I'm trying to get my head around today in just basic terms of, if we can take a look at the revenues. Are we all in agreement of what's there? Can we move anything? What can be accommodated? What can come in from other categories? Are there other revenues? Or can we decrease expenditures? And that's one way to get it done, as long as we are ensuring, I would think that the basic requirements of what the voters had looked at is the intent is there. And that's the nuance I'm not clear about. But I'm just trying to understand that as we begin to look at what I think really in terms of the one before us today about how we decrease costs is really the city of Tucson's proposal. But again, I'm just trying to get my head around how else we can get a recommendation back to the board as requested without looking at those at expenditures or revenues. But I'm happy. And I'm sorry, Farhad and then Tim.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I may, you're correct. You can look at the expenditure side as well as revenue. And then there was a third alternative that if additional revenue is needed, then RTA Next is part of that solution as well. So, and the board has already moved 4 projects to RTA Next for that purpose. So I just want to add that that's part of the mix of solutions that you can consider, given the fact that there are proposals on value engineering. Obviously, you can explore value engineering as long as it's not scope change.
Thank you. Mr. Tamur, what time is it in Paris?
Bonjour. It is, what is it, 4:45 here, so it's not terrible.
Okay.
I'm rather confused at the moment, so I'm gonna ask questions very simplistically. Is this saying that a scope change that reduces the cost of a project is not allowed and must go to RTA or go back to the voters?
Madam Chair, Tim, again, the 10% limit has been reached. So any changes, even if there are reductions, by definition, have to be approved by voters.
Okay, my response to that is that makes almost no sense because a scope change that reduces the cost is not the same as a scope change that leads to accrual toward the 10% cost increase rule. So I am very much struggling with that. Number two is my thought is if scope changes were approved that brought costs down, potentially you could drop below the 10% cost increase overall. But if it is the position of the executive director that any scope change must go to the voter, then I'm not sure the purpose of this meeting, because the purpose of this meeting was to discuss scope changes that would significantly reduce costs and bring the RTA 1 into completion generally within the existing dollars. So I'm not sure what we're doing here.
I understand. I'm sorry, Mr. Dilly.
I would have to concur with that comment
No.
from Tim. You know, if we've reached that 10%, I'm just trying to walk myself through the logic. If we've reached that 10% because of scope increase and cost increase associated with that, and we're proposing something that would decrease the cost of a project, wouldn't that be considered a credit towards that 10%? And I just, if you're just looking at the logic of it, it doesn't make sense. It would seem as though we should have the ability to discuss and weigh in on these proposed changes. And if that's the case, if it's not the case that we can do that, then I concur. I don't know why we're sitting here.
So again, Madam Chair, if I may, part of the solution was the RTA Next, and any recommendations for identifying funding from RTA Next. So that's within the purview of this committee to discuss that. And from the 10% perspective, you got to consider the 4 projects that have already moved to RTA Next. Those 4 projects count towards the 10% as well. So that action has already been taken. So I don't know how you can reduce $240 million to get below 10%.
Sure, good, yes. It strikes me with, I mean, the pleasure of the board. I think the direction that we received from RTA is to evaluate a lot of different alternatives here and to see what's possible. I, for one, would like us to consider the City of Tucson scope change, have a conversation about it, and be able to make a recommendation back to the TMC that should they determine that it is legal for them to consider that scope change, then we have made a recommendation to them based on what we believe to be the best thinking of this technical management group regarding the specifics of the proposed change. Does it meet the same requirements? Does it provide the same transportation corridors, et cetera, the language that others than I know so much better? Does that make sense to just have a conversation about it? Can we, that would not, I don't believe, violate open meeting law. We can still do this. And then it would be up to the board to decide whether it was in the scope to even evaluate it. When we can then provide a recommendation back that includes in our recommendations, one of them might be to consider a proposed scope change, should it be determined that they can legally do so. Otherwise, we can look at how we move it forward. Is that, can we look at that?
Your
Thank
pleasure,
you.
yes.
Thank you. Okay. Any objection? Okay. Who would like to, is that Sam? Tim? Is it up to Sam to take this forward at this point? Or I'd like to just understand what it is, from my perspective as the non-engineer, exactly what the city is proposing in a scope change. And what does it save? And is it possible with Does it meet, from the city's perspective, the same criteria that was on the ballot in 2006?
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure I'll defer to Sam here in a moment, but as a little bit of preamble, there is a package of potential scope changes on a few city projects that collectively would reduce cost significantly and possibly within the, or at least within striking distance of the available dollars. However, if a condition of doing those scope changes is that those projects that are going to save the money to allow us to deliver RTA 1 must be deferred to the voter, there's no point. There's simply no point of doing this. And then one of the projects that, based on all the discussion or what I'm hearing here, there's just no point in even talking about the Grant Road under the Union Pacific Railroad, because the ballot language doesn't match anything we've designed, discussed, contemplated, and would probably break the region with the amount of money it would cost to do it per the ballot. So I'm going to defer to Sam if you think it's worth our time to go through this list based on the constraints that are placed on it, that even if we have the great idea, which we do, we can't do it.
I'm trying to figure out how we get back to the RTA with what they have asked us to do. And if, does it sound like, are we hoping to convene until we get legal counsel again to say what's possible? Or do we want to at least have a Reader's Digest version of what we think might be a recommendation? Or simply indicate that under the current limitations, what we have been presented with is a challenge that we can't respond to, period.
I think it's worth the conversation. I think some of us who were at the RTA board meeting a few weeks ago heard Sam convey these ideas. I think it would be worth the rest of us hearing it and being able to at least have the discussion. So I would move that we have Sam step up to the plate and give us a home run speech.
Okay, thank you. Without objection, thanks, Sam.
All right, thank you all for the opportunity. So it'll be very similar to what I shared with the RTA board a few weeks ago. We did include a lot more information in the TMC packet, and so I'll run through this rather quickly. A quick preamble of my own here is, we recognize the challenge that's in front of us, and so the way that we came up with these recommendations is we locked in the room some of our smartest people in transportation and said, okay, how can we solve this problem? And we looked at everything from traffic volumes to safety statistics on these corridors, and just trying to identify ways that we can deliver these projects given the immense shortfall that we're facing right now. So that's how we came up with these. There were actually a lot of ideas that were thrown out. These were the ones that rose to the top that we thought were worthy of the conversation and should be considered for future discussion, or further discussion, excuse me. So the first one I'll start with is Grant Road, Oracle to Swan, stages 5 and 6, which is actually from Park to Palo Verde. And I think that this project actually represents the largest deficit of all the projects. Its current projected shortfall is $116.8 million. About half of that is right-of-way acquisition. And so what we did is and by the way, it's currently at 90% plans for the full 6-lane cross-section that's in the RTA ballot. So what we did is we took a look at a couple different options on how we could deliver this project. The first one, option 1, was to remove the bike lanes on Grant Road and invest in adjacent bike boulevard corridors, but ultimately deliver the 6-lane divided roadway with intersection improvements. And so the idea here is that we would still blow out the intersections and rebuild them with the indirect left turns, but we'd have a really skinny, narrow 6-lane cross-section through the remainder of the corridor. What that allows us to do is eliminate many of the costly right-of-way acquisitions that are on that corridor. The other option we looked at is essentially the same, but just reconfiguring how we might use the pavement in between the curb. And so instead of 6 lanes, potentially doing 4 lanes with the intersection improvements, but then also maintain bike lanes through the corridor. And so those were, both options have essentially the same impact of limiting their right-of-way acquisitions and demolition costs. We took a very, kind of blunt attempt at some cost savings. And so it's in the $50 to $77 million range. Again, if we can eliminate the right-of-way acquisition, that's the largest savings on that project in particular. Yep.
So taking these one at a time and looking at this one in particular, and I think this is a great example. And I think the two versions that you articulated here, Sam, are, absolutely worth us talking about and considering. The RTA plan for Grant Road, as I understand it, was a 6-lane road to increase capacity to 6 lanes. So from my perspective, and I may be wrong in this, but if you reduce it to 4 lanes, keep it at 4 lanes, then we're not really meeting what the voters approved. But if you do what you suggested in making it 6 lanes, but with the current right of way that we have right now, I think that meets what the voters approved. So I'm just curious.
I agree.
Would that be accurate, or would that be, and that's where I think, you save dollars, but you're still meeting the intent of the voter approved initiative for Grant Road.
Mhm. Please.
Madam Chair, Terry, again, the definition and the scope as outlined in the ballot, we would have to check that and make sure that it's consistent with that definition. And you're right, if it says 6 lanes and you still accommodate 6 lanes, then that's correct.
So thank you. And I think that's what we're getting at here. I think my hope is that if we can look at a project like this and say, we think that what the city is proposing is a scope change that we believe is consistent with what the voters approved, and we believe consistent with the mission, then that is one that we would recommend that the RTA board consider. At least consider to see if it's legal for implementation.
Yeah, and so, I think for this discussion, where I'm having issues or potential questions, I guess not issues, but where I would have potential questions is if we change the scope of the project and it's not consistent with what the voters approved, that to me seems like we have to go back to the voters. To me, I may be wrong here, but it seems to me that if the voters said, yes, we approve this plan and this is what we want, then I think if we do something other than that, then we have to go back. But if we meet the general scope of what we said we were going to do, and we can reduce the cost by doing that, to me, that seems like a really great idea.
When I look at an option 1, that to me is saying we could recommend that to the RTA board as consistent with voters and moving forward with the direction they've given us to see what we can do to reduce costs to try to skinny down to get ready for an RTA. Is that?
Madam Chair,
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Devon.
may I just ask a clarifying question? So when it says invest in adjacent bike boulevard corridors, is that cost included in the revised scope estimate of the project, or is that separate?
Yeah, thanks, Carmine, for the question. I think it's part of it. As I said, we didn't go into the fine details of what that would look like. The city's already made investments in bike boulevards adjacent to Grant Road. I think if this is a viable option and we want to move it forward, we'd want to just look to make sure that we're still providing a safe and low stress environment for people to bike. Our standards are to include bike lanes on new roads that we build. And so this would be going against that. And so I would, look for some flexibility to be able to invest in those adjacent bike boulevards.
What's the pleasure of the board is, do we think that RTA number 18, option 1 is one that we could recommend that the RTA board consider?
I for one would say absolutely. I think that meets the intent of the RTA plan. I think we can stand in front of voters and say we delivered. So I personally would be in support of that. And I don't know if we need a motion or anything.
Just
but-
to be clear to
Sure.
the other.
I would move that we include Project 18 and the recommendations from the city of Tucson, option A, I guess, as a recommendation to the RTA board as a way to deliver the current projects that have to be completed.
Thank you.
I'll
There's-
second that motion.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Mr. Tamur,
Sorry, Chair, I was a little slow on the clicking there. Can I add some commentary to this?
sure.
So this is a project that I don't want to give anybody false hope would actually be able to proceed. And the reason I say that is it is an approved project. It's at 90% design, and we have not been allowed to proceed to right-of-way acquisition and 100% design for 2 years because the RTA won't let us. So this is an example of the city of Tucson having the perception in the region of not being able to deliver a project. And we've been sitting and sitting and sitting for 2 years. So my commentary would be, if this goes to the board and ultimately gets approved to actually be the new scope and the new project, could I ask that the city of Tucson actually be allowed to complete the project?
I'm sure that would be the intent of the board. Thank you, Tim.
I don't mean to rebut too much, but it hasn't been so far.
Thank you. Well,
So
we can make
after two-
recommendations to the board. And we would certainly, if we are moving forward with option one, recommending that number 18, option one, with those scope changes be recommended to the board, obviously, we would not be doing so if we did not hope that there was a completion of the project. Thank you. Sam?
All right, we'll go on to the next project. I actually think I'm going to skip to project 15 because since we're talking about Grant Road, let's talk a little bit about the UPRR underpass at Grant Road because it's already been brought up a couple times. So this is a good example, and I think to your point, Terry, what did we promise the voters and what are we delivering? The ballot scope for this project is expand the railroad underpass east of I-10 to accommodate 6 lanes. The administrative code specifically calls out that the underpass should be reconstructed to accommodate this particular project. I believe early on, we learned that that was just going to be infeasible. Between the Union Pacific Railroad and all the utilities that are in the railroad right away, as Mr. Tamir mentioned, it would, in today's dollars, it'd probably be a $200 million project. So the city's been looking since that time for different ways to deliver this project. And what ultimately had been determined is building a 6-lane project within the existing prism of the underpass. If anybody's driven through that underpass, it's very narrow. So basically, we're just taking all the available space between the abutments and the piers to shoehorn 3 lanes through there in each direction. And so in order to do that, our recommendation was to build a separate bicycle and pedestrian bridge to accommodate specifically people biking because there would not be room for bike lanes on that project. For 3-4 years, we were marching down the path. We felt that we had the support from the RTA to move forward with that option. It wasn't until we had requested to advance the roadway portion of that to support the casino construction that we learned that the bicycle and pedestrian bridge would no longer be, an eligible element of the project. And so we've kind of been stuck spinning our wheels there. We're at 60% plans for that. We know the casino has already started construction, and so we definitely feel a sense of urgency to deliver this project. So where we currently stand is we've been having conversations about deferring that bicycle and pedestrian bridge. to, either another phase or try to find additional funding source. We still believe it's an important element to provide a safe passage for people walking and biking. But we also recognize that this is a project that is, within striking distance of us being able to deliver. So we offered two options. The one is just to build the 6 lanes, as I mentioned, through the underpass without bike lanes and just maintaining the narrow sidewalk that's on both sides of the roadway. We also looked at a rather innovative option too, which is to construct 3 westbound lanes because that is the high traffic flow area, and then 2 eastbound lanes with a 2-way cycle track on the south side of Grant Road to accommodate people walking and biking. And that's where we're currently at. There's both could be delivered for roughly the same cost. And by removing the bicycle and pedestrian bridge from the delivery of this project, that cost alone for the bridge was about $8.5 million. So, in fact, this project is coming in with a project surplus from its original cost estimate of $19.8 million. So I'll pause there and just answer any questions you might have.
I'm wondering, I don't know if it's possible, or when you were going through the first project, what you were reviewing was on the screens for us to see. If that would be, it'd just be really helpful if we can, that'd be great. Thank you. So that we can kind of track with you as you're going through the numbers. Thank you. Shane.
So just so I'm clear, is the reason why the Grant Road project as proposed by the city at this point in either of those options, is the reason why they're not moving forward is that 10% issue?
No, Madam Chair, Shane, the revision on that project was if there's scope expansions, the incremental cost of expansions cannot be covered by the RTA. And that's the offsite bridge that Sam just.
Farha, can you turn your mic on?
Thank you. So the incremental cost of scope expansions would have to be covered by the lead agency. And that's why the proposal that you have in front of you is recommending to defer that until later time when funding is identified.
So that's the one option, but there was another option, if I understood correctly, that had 3 lanes west and 2 lanes east with a bi-directional cycle corridor that's
Correct.
all under there. So
The ballot scope says 6 lanes. So that goes back to Terry's question. If you want to stay consistent with the ballot, it's a 6-lane scope.
Madam Chair. So Sam, in terms of the 3 lanes westbound and 2 eastbound, have you done recent traffic counts, and can you speak to the current volumes versus what the forecasted volumes were back in 2006 when the RTA plan was approved? Or just if you don't have the data, is there some ability to at least qualitatively speak to that issue of a reduced need for capacity on the eastbound lanes?
Thanks, Carmine. I was kind of making a face here because we have it. I don't have it right in front of me right now, but I know that we have those traffic counts, and we can certainly share them with the members of TMC. What the analysis we've done shows that the heavy flows are in the westbound direction. And so that is where definitely 3 lanes is needed. In the eastbound direction, it's not as heavy. And we've done a little bit of preliminary work on that option to see if it is in fact viable. And it appears that it would be, including taking into account the anticipated traffic from the new casino that's planned there. So by our early analysis here, it would work from a traffic flow perspective. And we wouldn't even be considering it if we hadn't thought that it would.
Madam Chair and Sam, didn't we have kind of the identical situation on Broadway where originally it was called for a certain cross section, but traffic was not supportive of it, and therefore we ended up reducing the cross section? And how did we do that without going back to the vote? But this would have to go back for a vote?
So, Madam Chair, Bill, it goes back to that significant change provision. So we were allowed to make changes up to that 10%. We have exceeded the 10%.
Madam Chair,
Carmen.
I think it would be helpful if we go through the projects, look at the options, identify the ones that we think warrant recommendation to the RTA board, and then allow the RTA board to look at the legal framework, right, relative to the 10%. And just by way of that, taking a quick glance at the statute that was referenced on the slide, 485309B, I do not see the 10% threshold in the statute, and so would appreciate receiving information, identifying where that 10% requirement is located. And I think also for us, and more importantly for the RTA board, seeing the dollar breakdown of how the 10% threshold has been reached or is potentially exceeded. So my hope would be that we go through these projects if in fact we think an alternative scope is reasonable, that we make that recommendation to the RTA board with a statement that says that there will need to be future confirmation on the method to go ahead and actually accomplish that.
I think on project 15, from my perspective, I think it's appreciating the city's reevaluation in scope, and that I would say that recommending that option 2 is a first choice if we find out it is legally viable and possible, because it appears to maintain the amount of traffic that we need to move, which is what we've been trying to do with option 2 as our fallback recommendation, or recommendation, B, if you will, should we find that option 2 is not viable.
Madam Chair, Carmine, it's section D in that same statute. Section D talks about the 10% differential
Thank you.
per element.
It's the,
I just had, so back in 2006, as contemplated, this project, did it factor in pedestrian, or was it strictly the 6 lanes? I'm curious.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, again, the scope ballot language was somewhat silent on that, but I believe the intent is to still accommodate the standard sidewalk bike lanes if you can, but it was very specifically to accommodate 6 lanes.
and as I said, my hope is that 6 lanes was designed at that time in order to accommodate a certain number of cars and vehicles and traffic, and that if it appears that the 5 lanes can accommodate that, then I guess what I'm looking at is I appreciate the scope changes and think that we should recommend them to the RTA board for further consideration. Whether we can do option 1 or 2 is limited potentially by the statutes, but that we have proposed options to skinny down the cost of RTA item 15.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry,
Sam
if I
and
could
Jim.
just finish
Yeah.
my thought on. So I asked the question because obviously with the passing of time, needs change, and our mode of transportation changes, it ebbs and flows. And so if it was the movement of people, whether it's vehicle or, I'm just wondering if, 5 lanes gets it done with pedestrian now moving there in other modes, whether it's walking or bicycling or what have you. So if we're moving the people, does that honor the intent of it? So that's where my mind was going.
Good perspective. Again, I think that's where I'm heading. That's option 2 if we can make it work. It's legal. I'm sorry.
I do seem to gravitate towards the option 2
Yeah.
myself.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Sam?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to actually answer Shane's question. I was looking at the administrative code for this project. So as I think Farhad correctly stated, it was the scope for this is vague. It's project 15, expand railroad underpass east of I-10 to accommodate 6 lanes is all it says in the ballot. If you go to administrative code, which is wildly inconsistent with the ballot, but just for a moment, let's pretend that it's not. It states that the benefits of the project are separating motorists, bicyclists, and pedestrians from train movements, also provides significant safety improvements. So it does sort of reference that piece of it. And then I did just get confirmation to your point, Carmine, that the traffic volumes or the traffic operations for both the 6 and the 5 lane plus the cycle track do operate at level of service C during the peak hour. So we do have that data.
Thank you. Yeah, Bill.
Madam Chair, Sam, what was the projected cost savings on this?
So that's that's the interesting part, is that the project is already has a surplus. And so really the cost savings are not building the bicycle and pedestrian bridge, which is about $8.2 million. Originally, it was part of the project because that was our way of still delivering the project and providing those safe movements for people walking and biking. So we're suggesting not building that, which is a big concession for us and to not build that, but offer two scenarios that would still meet the intent. And to Shane's point, we believe the 5-lane plus the cycle track meets the intent of building 6 lanes. Just only 5 of them are for vehicles.
But if you take option 1 and then end up building that pedestrian bridge later, do you still have a surplus? Is it still under budget?
It's still under budget. Yeah, you can see right now the current projected surplus is 4.9 million.
Okay.
So Sam, we're currently at about $5 million surplus, and you were suggesting potentially another 8.
No, the eight, yeah, that's a little misleading. We're just suggesting not building the pedestrian bridge as part of the project. So I guess if you would add the 8, the project would technically be a little over budget, but yeah, we're just,
At least we're 5 million.
Yeah.
What's the pleasure of the board? A committee.
Up there.
Thank you.
I'll put a motion out there. I'm not sure that that everybody feels the same way, but I'll move to advance RTA recommendation RTA number 5 with option 2 as the recommended option for consideration.
15,
I'm sorry, number 15, option 2.
option 2. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved in second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you very much. Terrific. Thank you, Sam.
All right, we'll go back just a little bit if you could scroll up to Silver Bell Road. So this one's an interesting one. It doesn't represent a ton of savings, but I think it's worth having the conversation. I'll get to my notes here. So Silver Bell Road is currently, this is the segment from Gorey to El Camino del Cerro. We are currently at 100% design. The current shortfall you can see is about a little over $5 million there. And this was one in particular that we looked at specifically at the traffic volumes in that area. And not only that, but just the overall impact to what is a very culturally sensitive area. And we know that there are some folks in the community that would like to see us not continue to disturb earth in and around this area. So we took a look at a couple options here. They both result in, I believe, let me see here. So they have this, in essence, the same ending point. It's just how we get there. So the first one is removing the median travel lanes and maintaining a wide roadway prism. The idea here is that the traffic volumes today don't necessarily warrant the additional travel lanes, but perhaps in the future we might be able to maintain the opportunity to widen to the inside. I know that there's precedence for this in other RTA projects, and so we had considered this as a potential. It's about a $2 million savings. It's not a ton of money. But then the other option is actually removing the outside travel lanes altogether, reducing the roadway prism down, and then that actually, now you can see the savings start to add up a little bit, a little over $4 million. Again, both result in removing travel lanes, but as I mentioned, we've taken a look at the traffic volumes, and this is one in particular where we just have not seen the growth, and the volumes are not what we thought they were in 2006. So we think this does have some merit to take a look at. You can see there are obviously cultural impacts of this. We do have to get a Section 404 permit for the cross drainage. Cross drainage is a big issue along this corridor, so we would still want to see those improvements done. But these are just a couple options to save some money.
And Sam, help me. I think Silver Bell was one of the projects that it was county, city, and Marana. What? Help me, Carmine, Terry, is this consistent with what the county and Marana have as a vision?
Madam Chair, so, as we've talked about Silver Bell, the portion that is the Marana, Pima County, so that's from that's from Camino del Cerro, I believe it is, to Ina Road. And that portion, I think, is currently identified in RTA as 3 lanes. And Marana and Pima County have advocated previously to build that out at 4 lanes. I think the key being matching the project that Sam's referring to. That's the city project in terms of the lane configuration. So there's not abrupt changes at the line delineating these 2 projects.
And you think it can be done without too much in and out? I mean, that this could be divided in a consistent way. I just don't want to see us have the 3 projects not line up in some way, but sounds like we can make that work.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, I mean, this item, Silver Bell Grant to Ina, I believe it's planned for 4 lanes. Is that what the case is? So
Yeah.
if this were reduced to 3 lanes, and I need Sam to confirm if they're going from 4 to 3 or 4 to 2, it would line up with the 3 lanes that were planned, at least in the ballot initiative north of this project.
Terry?
So this is one that I've given a lot of thought to recently, and I've given a lot of thought to it recently because of what continues to happen on I-10 with accidents and shutdowns. And there is very little in the way of north-south relief when something happens on the I-10. And Silver Bell could be an option there. And so I would be concerned at this point, and I would want to see a lot more data if we talk about removing lanes, reducing it, because I do think that could be a very important north-southbound corridor when we have traffic backed up on the freeway, and gives people an alternate route where they don't even have to get on the freeway if they're traveling from Tucson up to Marana, or Marana down to Tucson, or through the county, or whatever the case may be. So this is one I would have a lot more questions on, and I'd want to maybe sit down with Sam and his folks and our traffic engineers and the counties to talk a little bit more about this one in particular.
Any objection if we table this one, right, RTA 5, and I have a sense we'll be back as a committee at some point. Shane?
It doesn't seem to present a big factor in the cost, so.
Not going to make or break the deal, yeah.
In fact, I meant to say that the cost savings here isn't what you look at in some of the other projects that they propose. And I appreciate the creativity and thinking outside the box. I just don't have the same comfort level with this one that I do with the others that we've talked about already.
Any objection to holding that one for right now? Okay.
Do you want that in a motion or no?
Sam?
Yeah, thank you. And Carmine, just to confirm, it'd be 1 lane in each direction with turn pockets. So I imagine if we were going to transition to a 3 lane, eventually we would just transition out the median and then connect to a 3 lane. So we can talk more about that
Look at
offline.
that, thank you.
Yep. The last project that I want to talk about is First Avenue. And, I think what this all boils down to really is 2 big projects, First Avenue and Grant Road 5 and 6, when you talk about the shortfall. First Avenue is a project that is not fully funded in the tip. It's one of the 2 projects along with Grant 5-6 that doesn't have all its funding. This original ballot scope was to widen the 6 lanes with bike lanes and sidewalks. The RTA board has already made a decision to reduce the scope of this project to 4 lanes. And so we have been working on the design concept report and started to refine the alignment for this segment. And so I don't know that we necessarily need a decision today on this, because I think this is more or less just reporting out that the benefits of those decisions by the board we're starting to now see. With our early cost estimates, we're seeing a reduction in cost of 30 to 57-ish million dollars. I know that's a wide swath there. We are, still in the concept level of our planning process, but we have the alignment laid out, and we're now starting to see that we were able to reduce some of the major right-of-way impacts that would have otherwise been we would have felt with the 6-lane cross section. So that's really all I have to report on this, is just showing that, we've already demonstrated that if we can reduce these projects to the right size that the traffic volumes warrant, we can find significant cost savings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think then we could reaffirm and thank the city for their work on this and acknowledge as we go back to the board the potential cost savings that have come with that, our recommendations for the other two options to look at additional cost savings, and an indication that we'd be happy to continue to review that one other project. Bill? Yep. Yeah. How
Thank
did the
you.
reduction in?
The
flow rates
reduction to
happen?
the 4 lanes on this was made because at that point, we had not exceeded that 10%. Is that how that change was made?
Madam Chair, Bill, that was as part of the IGA for initiating the design concept report. And once the design concept report is finalized, then hopefully there's a discussion about alternatives and being able to justify that the 4 lanes would meet the traffic demand.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Sam?
That's not my understanding of the conversation. My understanding was that the RTA board made the decision to support the 4-lane cross section. What you're saying, Farhad, is that was just to initiate the IGA, that that the scope has not been changed on this project? Is that what you're saying?
My understanding of the conversation was that it was as part of initiating the design, and we had an IGA that was approved by the board to begin the design process and identify the 4-lane as the option for the design.
So the RTA board did approve the change to 4 lanes. Whether it was through the IGA.
It was the IGA, yes. It was they approved the IGA to begin the design process.
I'm sorry, you didn't answer the chair's question. Did they approve the 4-lane cross section? Yes or no?
The IGA that was approved considered the 4-lane as the scope, yes.
And so when we come back to the RTA for an amendment to start final design, we're not going to hear that, well, we don't approve the 4-lane, we need to go back to the 6-lane because of this 10% rule. I mean, it's 4 lanes, right? We're designing a 4-lane road. I just want to make that clear, that everybody understands that, because you're kind of wavering a little bit on that.
Again, as we discussed, that may be a legal question to ask at that time. Yeah, that's.
One thing, how about when the TMC reports back, one thing that we can clarify is that under RTA number 14, it is our understanding that the RTA board has approved the change in scope to 4 lanes, and that we are proceeding and that understanding. If that is not accurate, then the board can clarify that for us, but I believe that to be true. Tim?
Thank you, Chair Jan. That language is helpful. And I'll support that assertion and that language moving forward. I'm just forewarning, this is the trap we, as the city of Tucson, fall into time and again with the RTA. We go down the path, we think we're in alignment, 3 years pass, find out we're not. It's a cycle that repeats itself and repeats itself. And this is one that I am actually shocked. There's a discussion about whether it's 4 lanes or not. We did all of the heavy lifting necessary to get that approval. And there should be no wondering whether there's a legal concern. It's just quite frankly shocking and disappointing that we even have to have this conversation.
Thank you, Tim. I hear your frustration, and our hope is that we, as the TMC, can make sure that we get final clarification so that there is no confusion for the jurisdiction moving forward. Sam, that's it. Thank you to the city for continuing to look at those scope changes. I think, is there worth a moment? So we had the 2 elements to this. We've had some conversation and discussion about decreasing expenditures. Any discussion or review of the potential revenues in any way in the information that's the charts that we have received? I just want to make sure, I was just, looking over and making sure that we're all understanding and agreeing to what, was sent out as we look at all of the projected resources and revenues. Any concerns, conversations? questions that we would like as staff to report back at any point?
Madam
Carmine?
Chair, maybe just to get the conversation started a little bit, if we're looking at the table that was provided in the RTA board packet and also part of our packet on revenues. Had a question under the sales tax collection, the first row there, fiscal year 25-26 RTA sales tax collection. So it indicates 217.7 million. There is a footnote on that item that says it excludes overlap funds subject to RTA Next voter approval. So I would like some clarification on how then those overlap funds would be accounted for and the dollar amount. The conversation has been 40 million, I recall. And so where would those be reflected and when?
Sure. Madam Chair, Carmine, thank you for that clarification. So as you recall, as part of the RTA Next planning effort, we had the conversation about the overlapping of revenues, and any remaining revenues from RTA 1 would still have to be identified in RTA Next, and expenditures for those revenues have to be assigned to certain expenses. So the $40 million was a placeholder. It's already in the RTA Next draft plan that was approved by the board, recommended by this committee. So that $40 million at the time that we finalize the ballot for RTA Next, we can identify where that money would be spent on, and then that would require authorization by the voters.
And Carmine, I'm wondering, and others, if we might do this, I think, because there are, when we reviewed the potential revenues with things such as this, is there another 40 million? What might exist? Wondering if it would be possible for us to delineate the questions and or provide them to Mr. Mojimi so that we can provide those, then ask that those be presented to the RTA board, that we say we've recommended these expenditure adjustments and expenditures. We also recommend another scrub of the potential revenues in the following ways. Because I might not have all the numbers at my fingertips today, but I think it's important that we capture and identify the things that we would like staff to be able to report back to the entire board so that they have both sides of the equation when they make the discussion. So if there's other just questions like that, if we could just delineate them, and then we'll get them to you, again, if we don't capture it today. Does that make sense, Carmine?
Be happy to.
Thank you.
Sure. And Madam Chair, are you suggesting we delineate those today or that?
Yes,
Okay,
yeah,
perfect.
just run through them so people get a sense of the kinds of things we're looking at as potential additional revenue. Others may have some as well, and then we can present that as part of the package back to the board.
Okay. And if I may, Madam Chair, just sort of a follow-on question. So looking at the fiscal year 25 RTA budgeted revenues, there's $126.7 million budgeted. So that's 126.7 of the 217.7. So then that leaves approximately 90.9 million for fiscal year 26. And I'm trying to understand then the relationship of that forecasted amount for fiscal year 26 and then the carryover funding, right? So if our RTA Next was not approved and we continued collections through June of 26, what would the forecasted revenue for 26 be? Would it be that 90.9 million roughly, or would it be some different dollar amount? Or maybe the question is, could we get a breakdown of what the fiscal year 26 forecasted revenue is and how it lays out on a monthly basis?
Sure, be happy to provide that. Obviously, I don't have that with me
Yes.
today, but yeah, we can provide that breakdown.
Just delineate the questions today. Sam, and then Carmine will come back.
Madam Chair, if whoever's controlling the screen there, if you scroll down, I believe we have, if you keep scrolling down, our questions are outlined in the letter from Mr. Tummy right there. You just go a little too far. Scroll
So
up. Yep.
can we- About Sam, will consider that formally submitted in, again, as part of the questions then that could be responded to as we present the package back to the TMC. I'm sorry, to the RTA board.
So, Madam Chair, thanks for providing that memo ahead of time. I received it last week, and there's a memo in your packet addressing these questions, but we'll be happy to expand on it for the board as well.
Thank you. Make sure that we have that to the RTA. Thank you. Anything else at this point? Well, and how about, we do have some time before the next board meeting. So by doing this, I hope that if there's any additional questions that you have that staff could respond to about the revenues, because I might not have it on my fingertips, the revenue numbers today, and that's why I want to allow staff an opportunity to have a robust response as the entire board reviews this. Terry?
Do we have a breakdown yet of the remnant parcels and what those would produce? Or is that yet to be
Thank you.
determined?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair Terry. We're still continuing to compile that information. We don't have a total dollar amount, but we're getting close to being able to have at least the number of parcels, which corridors. That's been ongoing discussion. The board at the last meeting requested for all the entities to please provide that information so we can combine that and bring it back to the board at the next meeting.
Thank you. Tim?
Thank you, Chair. Since the topic of remnant parcels was brought up, just a quick update for everybody. There was a lot of speculation about the parcel obtained along Grant at Campbell, the old Bookman's, and people were asking, why did the city sell a part of it to a Starbucks? None of that's true. The Starbucks is built on a private parcel that was never part of it. And the reason that parcel appears to be remnant is because we've been waiting for 2 years to finish the design and start the project. So put the urban legend to bed. The city did not profit off of buying parcels and selling it to a Starbucks.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Carmen?
Just a couple other things maybe for follow-up. On the 25-26 RTA sales tax collection, I'm curious how the investment revenue is incorporated. So any interest earned on dollars we have, getting a breakdown on that, and is it included in the 217.7?
So, Madam Chair, Carmine, so especially with the interest earned, we've been keeping track of that as part of cash in hand once we actually have actuals. So the cash in hand amount includes all the interest earned, but the projection, it's very difficult to project that not knowing what the burn rate would be for individual projects. So we don't project into the future, but we report actual collections as part of the cash in hand.
Okay. So that would be down under the line that says cash on hand, the unaudited, the 261.
That includes
Okay.
interest earned, yes.
So seeing a breakdown of what the interest earned is would be helpful.
Thank
If I may, Madam Chair, I think just similarly along the lines of an additional level of detail, the maintenance of effort contributions, the 22.2 million, seeing a breakdown on what that is, right, by actual revenue or jurisdictional amount, that would be of interest. And then I think just on the supplemental PAG HERF funds, so the 25 through 29 plan, the HERF 2.6, seeing a table that shows the amounts of funds available and where they're programmed. And then I think just one last question from my standpoint. Can you explain, Mr. Mogimi, we see a present value of projected resources per state statute. So it's about midway down in the table. There's a row that says projected available resources nominal. that's 888 million roughly. And then there's a present value line item that says 843 million. So what is the requirement by state statute and how is that present value calculated?
Sure. Be happy to expand on that as well, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Carmine. So the provision outlines identifying all revenues programmed, and we use the tip as all revenues programmed, including HERF and federal fund and RTA funds. And then the formula requires to identify those funds 5 years into the future and then bring that revenue value back into present value as a apples to apples comparison with the present cost of those projects. So it's a simple present value calculation of that revenue in the current year. And then that's where the number comes from. The provision actually is very specific. Utilize all identified revenues and then bring back to present value. And we can provide that detail as well.
And just to follow on, if I may, so it says projected available resources. That the breakdown of that projection would be helpful to see.
Of course. That, again, just for reference, it's based on what's in the tip. So you already have HERF, STBG, RTA revenues in the tip. So, but we'll break it down
I
even
think-
further.
Thank you. I think it'd be helpful to pull that together again. I think our job back to the board is to figure out how we can get RTA done. And this helping us really review and provide the information for the board of what's making up all of the income is very helpful. Thank you. Sam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to follow up on Carmine's questions, I think it'd be helpful to see the first two lines broken out by fiscal year. So seeing separately fiscal year 25 sales tax collection, fiscal year 26 sales tax collection, and then same with the MOE contributions and other. I think as clear as possible, we can make this table. I realize it's probably condensed for simplicity's sake, but I think we should expand and really kind of go through this line by line to make sure we fully understand how many dollars are available and where there's opportunity for the RTA board to make some decisions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to the city for helping us walk through some potential opportunities for the board to evaluate RTA next and hopefully get it done. Is there anything else?
No, ma'am.
Anything else for the good of the order?
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
I apologize, coming back again. So the,
He
under
works
the,
for Sarita.
under the estimated expenditures, I know we talked about expenditures a little bit before, but just a question, the $1.159 billion estimate, what is the date of the estimates?
So thank you, Madam Chair Carmine. The estimates are what's provided in the tip. So we use the tip as the official document. And the tip was adopted last May by Regional Council and finally approved in the fall by FHWA and the state. So that's the most recent estimate that we have that's been
24,
used.
2024.
Madam Chair, just one last question. We've been talking about remnant parcel sales. I assume that what we're talking about are only parcels that were acquired by RTA funds on these specific projects.
That is correct. So
Thank you.
but through the IGA process, we identify the lead agencies to purchase properties, and then they submit a reimbursement using RTA dollars. And by definition, those are the parcels we're talking about.
Thanks.
Anything else? Tim? Anything else? Good. Thank you very much. The Technical Management Committee is adjourned.
Tim, it's your pleasure. Are you there?
Are we ready to switch over to the management committee? I'm sorry, there's a bit of an echo that I don't know if I'm contributing to.
Mr. Tamura, it kind of seems like they're going to take just a short break here. But it looks like they should be back fairly soon.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Saw them all running off.
We have a quorum in the room as well, anytime you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Farhad. So I guess I will call to order the PAG Management Committee meeting of Wednesday, May 14th. And item number 2 is, or do we have a quorum? I don't hear a response if there's a quorum.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, yeah, we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. With that, item 2, approval of the March 12th, 2025 meeting summary. Is there a motion?
So moved and seconded.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's go ahead and call the question, and all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is there anybody opposed? All right, motion carries. With that, we go to item 3, update on the development of Pima Associated Governments PAGs FY 2026 and FY 2027 overall work program. Adam Ledford, I turn it to you.
Good afternoon, good morning. My name is Adam Ledford and I serve as the Program and Policy Coordinator for PAG. I appreciate the opportunity to provide an overview of PAG's draft fiscal 26 and 27 overall work program. For context, PAG is required to produce a biennial scope of work known internally as the Overall Work Program, or OWP. The OWP consists of transportation planning program for the region, as well as PAG's other programs and their respective goals. The OWP must be approved by ADOT and is in effect for 24 months beginning on July 1st. Per federal regulations in Title 23, the OWP must include a discussion of PAG's planning priorities and proposed work for the next 2-year period by major activity and task, the organization designated to perform the work, the schedule for completing the work, the resulting products, the proposed funding by activity and task, and a summary of total amounts and sources of federal and matching funds. The proposed work must include the federal required activities of PAG as the federally designated metropolitan planning organization. The requirement activities include development of the long-range regional transportation plan, as well as the short-range transportation improvement program, along with the required components of these, such as travel demand modeling, air quality conformity, Title VI analysis, and performance reporting. To ensure that the draft work program will include federal required activities, a review is conducted by ADOT, FHWA, and FTA. Based on that review, we're pleased to report that comments indicate that PAG's OWP will be in compliance with federal requirements. In terms of the organization of the document, it begins with an introduction along with a section on regional planning background and overview. Then the document is organized into general categories like transportation activities or RTA support that contain separate sections dedicated to each of the 15 work elements. For each work element, the sections include a description of the goals, a table with anticipated products, and estimated completion dates, strategies to achieve the outcomes, and funding sources. The appendices include the required functional organization chart, accomplishments and highlights from fiscal 24 and 25, and the revenue and expenditure tables for each year. For revenue and expenditure sections, there are 6 tables. Table 1 are the available funds available. This table shows carryover as well as anticipated revenues by fund source, with federal sources at the top, followed by state and local sources as you move down the table. Table 2 is the local share revenue. This table lists PAG member agencies and their local share contributions to PAG. No changes from the previous OWP are proposed for these contributions. Table 3 is total revenue by program area. This table lists the work elements by row and the funding sources in the columns to total both by program area as well as by fund source. Table 4 is the total expenditure by program area and category. Table 5 is staff allocations by program area. This lists the full-time equivalent values by work element. And Table 6 finally is the capital and equipment and consultants, including pass-through funding. This table provides a detailed listing by work element and fund source for those items that are $5,000 or more. Thank you very much, and a special thank you to Pima County and City of Tucson for providing comments, the answers to which are provided in this packet. This wraps up the overview, and at this time, I'd like to ask Jamie Brown to join me at the lectern, and we're happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you. And Mr. McGimmy, I'll defer to you since you're in the room to see if there's any questions that people have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be happy to answer any questions. I don't see any, Mr. Chair. Back to you.
Okay, thank you to staff for the presentation and the work on the OWP. Hearing no further questions or discussion, I believe we can move on to item 4, Regional Mobility and Accessibility Plan RMAP update. Jeanette, you're in.
Members of the management committee, thanks for having me here this morning to give you an update on where we stand with the Regional Mobility and Accessibility Plan, our RMAP. As you guys know, this is our federally required long-range plan. We update it every 4 years. And we are on the home stretch of getting this 30-year plan accomplished. So I do want to say thank you to all of your staff for participating and helping us get to this point. Just as a reminder, we did approve the finance plan with a fiscal constraint at $16.2 billion. So all of our projects have to come in under that $16.2 billion. We were able to accommodate with that goal and keep everything fiscally constrained. So the finance plan and the project list were approved last year, and we moved forward with our modeling and GIS analysis and put together our performance report based on those projects and the feedback we got at that time. That gave us the green light for the modeling. And this go round, we used what's called our activity-based model. That's a much more granular, detail-oriented modeling approach. And we're really excited to be able to use that more advanced way of taking a look at our roadway system. We did complete the modeling work as well as our performance report. We brought that information to the RMAP working group last week for a presentation on all the details of the nitty-gritty technical work that we did. We took some questions at that time, but we haven't received any additional feedback from the committee. We intend on presenting some of those details, not as much, to the TPC next week, as well as just a project overview on where we stand. I just wanted to remind you all that the projects in that plan come from your plans. They come from your comprehensive plans, your master plans. They come from the TIP projects that are under construction that have funding, as well as RTA. RTA Next projects are also included. High capacity transit, as well as ADOT projects, and expansions and investments in active transportation, as well as transit service expansion. So the project list is pretty thorough in covering everything that we heard from the group. In total, there's 170 projects in there. So we're over a 30-year timeframe. It's quite ambitious, but the modeling work shows that we anticipate a population increase of 180,000 folks. So makes sense that we'll have some expansions and needs in those 30 years to accommodate that growth. We have also sent out our interagency consultation for air quality conformity to our partners, mainly the folks at EPA, FHWA, ADEQ, and ADOT. We received confirmations that they received that information. Most didn't have any questions, but we are still taking comments on that. So if we do hear back from those agencies, we will keep the TPC and you all informed. We don't anticipate any issues there because we are in conformity. So that was a positive outcome there. We do have a draft put together, and that draft will be presented to the TPC here pretty shortly as we just button up the last, finishing touches, get the cherry on top and get it all buttoned up nicely. And then we will open it up for a 30-day public comment period. Of course, at which time your staff and TPC and everyone on the RMAP working group will also have the opportunity to submit comments and feedback to us at that time. And then we will be preparing a final draft for the regional council. We anticipate bringing that to regional council in July. So just here pretty shortly, and hopefully we'll get that approval at that time. That's all I have for you today. If you have any questions, let me know. We do have our meeting scheduled next week with TPC, and we'll be giving a more detailed presentation to them at that time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for the presentation. And Mr. McGimmy, same ask of you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do not see any questions in the room.
All right. We're setting a great pace here. Thank you for the presentation. And we go to number 5, Regional Transportation Revenues Update. James.
Members of Management Committee, if you'll turn to Table 1 of the Regional Transportation Revenues Report through March, PAG has collected about 24.3 million in regional HERF dollars, while the STBG apportionments for the fiscal year are projected at $21 million. In Table 3 and Figure 1 through March, more than 132 million in HERF and vehicle license tax was collected across the region. As I mentioned, PAG collected about 24 million, while the remaining amount was distributed to member jurisdictions. Regional HERF revenues show a slight decrease year over year and a 4% increase compared to the 5-year average. Table 4 shows HERF 12.6 in detail. Through March, we collected $24.3 million, which is more than 16% over the ADOT official forecast. Reporting of actuals was delayed in November and December of FY24, affecting the year-to-year comparison. Table 5 shows HERF 2.6 was stronger than expected collections, totaling over 5.4 million through March. And with Table 6 through March, PAG had collected 119 million, and which is in an interest-bearing account. Most of these dollars are spoken for. In Table 7, we look at the city and town HERF distributions year to date. Table 8 shows HERF 12.6 and 2.6 we have already seen. We also have Pima County HERF and Pima County vehicle license tax, the portion set aside for transportation use only. And Table 9 has the previous 5 years and lets you see how much HERF your city or town received, while Table 10 shows us gallons of gas sold in Pima County through various fiscal years. Keep in mind that the amounts shown are for the same year-to-date period during the previous 4 fiscal years. The region typically sees about 13% of statewide gasoline sales, and through March, we were just under 13% for the fiscal year. And in Table 11, nearly 94 million has been collected in TPT through March, trending closely to the adopted budget, while showing a small increase from the same period last year. Mr. Chair, that concludes my update. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions from the room?
Mr. Chair, I do not see anyone raising their hand for a question.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And unless there's any further business, I believe that brings us to an adjournment.
Safe travels.
Thank you all.